Welcome y'all to Robin on the Farm. If you have some self-rising flour and some milk, then you can make a really good loaf of homemade bread in just 1 hour. This has got to be the easiest loaf of bread that you'll ever make. This is a no knead, no rise, no yeast, no eggs, no sugar, no oil, no butter kind of loaf, and it is good. So you can make this one even if you're a total beginner and you've never made bread before. I make a lot of breads around here. I make sourdough breads, fresh milled flour breads, really soft and fluffy yeast breads. But the funniest thing to me is that my very most popular recipe is this 2-ingredient beginner bread. It's so simple to make and everyone loves it. But that makes kind of a small tea-sized loaf of bread. And my most common question that I get is, can I make this into a bigger loaf of bread? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So today I'm going to show you how to make that super simple 2-ingredient beginner bread, make it using the same method, and just make a bigger loaf. So I think you're going to like this one. If you're a brand new beginner bread maker, give this one a try. It's going to get you hooked and you'll want to make all the other bread recipes that I make too. Before you even begin, be sure to get your oven preheated to 350 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. I think it's 180 degrees Celsius. You want to get your oven preheated because this is so fast, so simple to whip up that you're going to be waiting on your oven to preheat if you don't do that first. Okay, so pull out your self-rising flour, and we want 3.5 cups of self-rising flour right on into a big mixing bowl. That's about 410 grams if you'd rather measure that way. So 3.5 cups. I'm using my white lily flour. You can't find this everywhere, but this is my favorite self-rising flour. It tastes so good. So 3.5 cups self-rising flour. To that, now we want some milk. I'm going to add 2 cups of milk. Now, I like to use whole milk, but for this recipe, you can use a lower fat milk, you can use 2%, 1% skim milk, or you can even use a milk alternative. You can use a nut milk. Oat milk works really well in this recipe, but the thing to remember is that the higher the fat content, the better it's going to make your bread. You're just going to get a better texture, a better result from your bread. But I have heard from people that made my other recipe, my smaller loaf, they have even used water in this recipe and said it turned out great. So any kind of milk will work just fine, or even water if you're in a pinch. Okay, so I'm going to add 2 cups of this cold milk right into my bowl with my 3.5 cups of self-rising flour. Now you just want something to mix it up. This is my cool Danish dough whisk. You can use a wooden spoon, a rubber spatula, anything that you want. This recipe is so great too because you don't need any expensive equipment. You don't need a big mixer. You just need something to be able to bake it in. You need a loaf pan and an oven. Now, if you're measuring in grams, that was 480 grams of milk. Now, take a look at my bread dough. This is definitely more like a batter, isn't it? And this is exactly what you want it to be like. Now, this makes this recipe even easier because we're just going to pour this into a loaf pan. We don't even have to shape it into a loaf. Now, for this recipe, I'm going to use an 8.5 inch by 4.5 inch cast iron loaf pan. You can use any loaf pan that you want. It can be a 9x5. That'll work just fine for this recipe too. But I love the cast iron because it's non-toxic. There's none of those chemicals to get into our foods. I have mine oiled up really well with some coconut oil. So I'm just going to take this batter and I'm going to pour it into my loaf pan. Once you have your batter in the loaf pan, just smooth out the top a little bit, and that is all it takes. This is already ready to throw into the oven. Now, something to remember about this loaf is that you can get creative with this loaf of bread. If you want to throw in a cup of cheese, a teaspoon of garlic powder, some jalapenos, you can get creative with it and make really, really delicious homemade bread that way too. This is just a great base, but it's great by itself too. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw this in the oven. I have it preheated to 350 degrees, and I'm going to let this bake in the oven for 50 to 55 minutes. At about 35 minutes, I'm going to take a look at it, and if I need to put some foil over the top to keep it from getting too brown, then that's what I'll do. But I will show it to you when it's ready. Now this recipe works so well because we're using self-rising flour. It already has baking powder and salt added to it. And that baking powder is what gives our bread rise. So we don't have to add any yeast. Now, if you don't have any self-rising flour, or you can't find any, you don't want to run to the grocery store, then you can make your own at home. All you need is some all-purpose flour, some baking powder, not baking soda, baking powder, and some salt. So to make this 2-ingredient bread into a 4-ingredient bread, then you're going to want 3½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1½ tablespoons of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Mix that all together and then add your 2 cups of milk. And there you go. That's how you can make this really easy 2-ingredient bread, even if you don't have self-rising flour. Okay, y'all, our 2-ingredient bread is fresh out of the oven. I let this bake for 50 minutes at 350 degrees. It smells so good. Now, what I like to do is I like to turn my bread out of the loaf pan immediately after getting it out of the oven. Ooh, that's hot. Oh, look at this. Now, if you've ever made my smaller loaf, this one definitely is a lot bigger. This looks great. This is more of a standard size loaf. Okay, now, this is totally optional. You don't have to do this. This is 2-ingredient bread, but if you want to make it really good, then you can melt a little bit of butter and just brush it on top. This will give you really good buttery taste. It'll give you that pretty shine on top, and it'll give you a little bit softer crust, which I like. To get the best crumb and texture out of your bread, you're going to want to wait for it to cool off before you slice into it. But who can do that? We just made homemade bread, and you know what? I'm going to slice right on into mine. It is going to be too hot. It might crumble a little bit, but that's okay because I like to eat warm bread after I make it. So let's go ahead and just slice into this loaf of bread. I wish that y'all could smell my home right now because it smells amazing. Really, nothing smells better than homemade bread. Look at that! It's steaming, it's hot, but look how good it looks. I can smell it even more now. What a fantastic little loaf of bread. Super simple, super fast, only 2 ingredients, and made in just about an hour. Doesn't get much better than that. I'm going to leave the printable recipe for the simple 2-ingredient beginner bread that's ready in just an hour. I'll leave the printable recipe down in the description and on my website, robinonthefarm.com. While you're there, check out our handmade beeswax bread bags. This is what I like to store all of my homemade breads in. Give this one a try and then try some of my little bit more complicated recipes because I know you can make those too. It's so good.
Robin's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough. With flour on her apron, loving each knead, ground wheat fresh, sowing her seed. The smell of fresh bread